Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Hello and welcome to the Technically Friends podcast, hosted by Harrison Wolf and Timothy Reuter. My name is Harrison. I've wanted to find a way to highlight the amazing people I've met throughout my life who are, without exception, all smarter, harder working, and better looking than me. And these are folks with deep expertise in some aspect of the technology industry and who continue to achieve success in their field as key players across sectors and companies or launching their own efforts to drive positive change.
And I'm Timothy. In general, the people we talk to are on their way up. Not the well-established C-suite, but the new executive, director who is navigating their career, or the youngish visionary founder, imagining startups from the ground up. I'm personally tired of only hearing from the people who made it. And we wanted to highlight the people who are still dealing with the challenge of politics, bureaucracy, home life, and global influences. If we do it right, it will be as if you're listening in on a meaningful conversation between three work friends talking about the more interesting aspects of life, the universe, and everything.
And after the launch of our first three podcasts, we heard from a lot of you and decided to offer video and audio on YouTube, as well as our audio format in Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So check us out wherever it makes sense for you, and please do subscribe. Now, we're really excited for the conversation today with someone Timothy and I have known for about the same amount of time as we've known each other. She's an amazing person. She has some of the most diverse set of skills and knowledge, and is always somebody who's willing to tell you the honest truth, even if you don't want to hear it. So, Timothy, I hand it over to you. Please welcome our guest, Dr. Tooba Durraze. Durraze? How do you say it, Tooba?
Yeah.
Durraze. I don't know. You're not Italian, so I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
Tooba Durraze.
The Italian,
Anyway, go ahead.
Is Durraze? It's like the Italian pronunciation? Yes, no, but Durraze.
Well, Tooba, I've been excited to see that you have fulfilled what I think Harrison and I always knew you were destined for, which is creating your own startup, which you founded about a year and a half ago, Amoeba AI.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what Amoeba AI is and what does it do?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, first of all. And I'm sure this is going to be a fun conversation. Amoeba AI, I begrudgingly created my own startup because I was in the world and this problem kept coming up and it was like not solved for me. So Amoeba AI essentially stemmed out of some of my research at MIT. I was studying the invention of all this Gen AI means we're creating all this new data. Like, could you find uses for that data without having human intervention? So I was studying something pretty lofty. Like, could you basically just create algorithms and set them in the wild and then they find uses within the data of like what the data could be used for? And during my PhD, we applied it to big data problems like pharma and smart city data, which I think was really interesting. But I was working at that time at a startup called Qualified, and I realized that you could apply that to small data problems too. So essentially, Amoeba AI stemmed out of that. And our theory is we're changing the way humans interact with data as it relates to business intelligence. And we're shifting people away from asking data questions, which seems to be like the interaction model right now, into the data sort of telling you where to pay attention, where to look. So it's kind of completely flipping the problem on its head.
Very cool. And we're going to spend most of the conversation talking about you and your personal journey, but I just want to make sure I understand. So, I mean, one of the dirty secrets, as I understand it, of data science is that it's actually very human intensive. And that includes a lot of the big AI companies like OpenAI, which employ armies of people, often in less developed economies, to label training data.
Yep.
So it sounds like what you're doing is trying to change the paradigm so that it isn't such a labor-intensive process in order to make data useful and actionable. Is that right?
Absolutely. I think when it comes to training data, like obviously we're heading towards the right direction of having it not be so human labor intensive. but we're not there yet. As in, like, you can't really use an LLM to label your data yet, right? It would not do that dependably. I think we're working on neurosymbolic into neuromorphic architecture. So neurosymbolic architecture gives you the best parts of deterministic mixed with the more fun parts of like a neural net, essentially combined together. And we feel like neurosymbolic or neuromorphic architecture eventually will be the thing that allows you to autonomously label data. I don't work on the data labeling side of things, working on a much kind of smaller slither of problems where essentially the data that you're sitting on top of is mostly structured anyways, if you think about business data, essentially. But the thing that I'm trying to shift is how humans who are consumers of that, so we consume that via what, like dashboards and spreadsheets right now and all of that, how humans who are consumers of that, how do we change their mindset to be truly data driven, right? The analogy I like to use is it's the way we use data right now. We say we're data driven, but we're basically driving a Waymo ourselves. But like, what happens if you take us out of the driver's seat and like the Waymo's like kind of driving? Essentially, could your data do that for you in your business? So it's a combination of like, I would say philosophy right now mixed with where technology is headed, but changing the way we perceive data. I think it's like the bigger undercurrent, essentially.
It seems like you're applying that same approach of we need to make the world a bit more data focused and to solve problems
Yeah.
than in the past. And I'm just wondering, do you have sort of a typical company or a typical CEO who's trying to solve a problem in which your Amoeba AI can help them?
I think in terms of like our ICP, we're a data product, so we're as horizontal as it gets, essentially. In terms of people who are best suited to leverage this, or people who sit on top of, I would say like $1 million to $3 million in spend in terms of like what they're doing activity-wise to drive their businesses. So not super small company, I would say Series A and up. I think where it gets interesting is enterprises who sit on top of a ton of data, which is why even our early customers are towards the enterprise side versus the SME side. And I think in terms of personalities, it is actually quite like you guys, people who are forward thinking in a way where you're not really bound by where technology sits right now. And again, it sounds a little bit more kind of existential or philosophical, but the people who will like shepherd us into the new era of this are not going to be the people who are so consumed with like, the day-to-day consumption of the tools that sit right now, versus like completely reinventing the way that you're looking at problems, because problems will change essentially,
Yeah.
right? So the true like forward thinking CEOs and marketers, and there are a lot of them obviously on the startup side, because I think people are completely reimagining the way that businesses are run, technology is created, like all of that. But I think for me personally, it's more interesting to take someone who's like an old head and like convert into this new way of like thinking.
I love that. That's great. What first drew you into AI and data science? Because clearly you're passionate about it. You have a vision for how it can transform the world.
Yeah.
You've been a part of different implementations of it, whether you're at the World Economic Forum or at these startups or in your research. It really seems like you're somebody who wants to take data and transform the way we interact with our world.
I think my fascination is a little bit more creative than like on the quant side. Essentially, I want the math to math, quote unquote, is what I would say. We have all this like power at our disposal in terms of like how much things can compute, how much machines can compute. And then we sit there and we limit them by like what we can kind of, how we can define a problem or how we think they should solve the problem. And that it to me is like so silly. So my fascination started with, I would say, there's a 60s philosopher, it's like Polanyi's paradox, which is tacit dimensions of humans. So humans know a lot, but they can only convey but so much, because language can only convey but so much, essentially. And then take that and apply that to data, like as in there are tacit dimensions to data. So at any given point in time, we're not activating like all of the data. So we're not really finding out like everything outside the realm of like kind of the questions that we're asking. So to me, I'm like fascinated by why humans would be so smart to create technology that's so powerful, but then be so kind of limited by like how they apply it and how they're limited. Part of it is obviously there are security concerns, and within reason, like that has to be looked at. But I feel like we like lose a little bit of our creativity as we're starting to apply some of these machines. So I'm fascinated by that. I'm fascinated by like what does the world look like if, the machines, like I'm on the optimistic side, if the machines were to take over, like does my world look like I sit on a beach and I like, drink margaritas and I surf all day because like all the problems are solved for? And why is that like a bad outcome, right? Essentially. So I'm fascinated by like what the utopian version of what this can look like. And I think it starts with like practically applying it to like capitalistic things, like business centric use cases. Because if you solve it for like the capitalistic gains, then you end up kind of solving it more broadly. I hate to say it, but it's there's a article that came out the other day. It's like all the world's problems you can boil them down to math problems, right? Everything is a math problem. You can solve like world hunger, it's a math problem. You can solve like within reason, like all of these things mathematically can be solved. It's the humans that kind of intervene and have their own agenda.
Let me actually push back on this a little, because I don't think we've discussed this. I'm actually in the process of becoming a therapist.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
so I was previously in tech, as you currently are, where most things are viewed as a math problem, right? As you said, couldn't world hunger just be solved by making sure everyone has access to the amount of food, right? The distribution is a problem. But once you get into therapy, of course, you start thinking relationally, which isn't a math problem. And I would even say, this is part of the issue around AI. The question is, if AIs create vast amounts of wealth, right? And maybe you could sit on a beach if we have a system where that's distributed widely. But I can easily imagine, it's Sam Altman, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, and Elon Musk have all the money, and the rest of us sort of are eating insects. And that's not a math problem. That's how do we relate to each other?
I will. Okay, this is my theory. My theory is you're absolutely right, by the way. Just because I'm saying there's a utopian view of the world doesn't mean that it practically plays out that way. Everything is a math problem in the sense that you can solve world hunger. Mathematically, it's a quantities problem, right? And like you can solve it. But the reason it's not solved is not because like there are not machine or computation techniques to solve it. It's because humans like sit on top of that, right? There's an agenda there to like not solve it. So I think in the short term, AI is going to exacerbate the divide even more. Definitely. The rich are going to get richer. The poor are going to get poorer. The middle class is going to get
Hopefully you get rich. I'm rooting for you to be on the rich side of that.
I hope I don't aim for richness. I am an immigrant in this country. So like there are but so many ways to make like a good chunk of money, enough that you can set yourself up, right? Like things are getting more expensive and all of that. So my aim has never been like, I want oodles amount of money. Although knock on wood, if I get oodles amount of money, I think that's great. I'm not gonna, shy away from that. But I think like the idea of, enough middle people that try to kind of bridge is always going to exist, right? There's something to be said about the fact that you went from tech to therapy, which is like a very interesting path. If you look at some of our colleagues, a lot of people moved into like the human dimension after being in tech for so long, because and I can say this fully sitting in the Bay. Oftentimes I want to bang my head against the wall because of the kinds of conversations that are happening, the things that people are concerned about, the things that people are essentially talking about, and how homogenous it seems. So there are bubbles in tech, but I think the more disillusioned you become with tech, the more you realize the human dimension matters. And the people who sit at the intersection of that will be the ones that kind of bridge it. You're more likely to bridge it than, say, like a Sam Altman, who's like on entirely the tech side, right? We used to have these debates at the World Economic Forum about like, okay, who has responsibility of a kill switch, as an example? If the AI is taking over, who builds it? Do NGOs build it? Like, who builds it? Like, they don't have resources to build it. Who builds it? Then who controls it? And then how do we make sure the person who controls it doesn't become corrupt? Because inherently, anyone with that kind of power is going to become corrupt, in my head.
It's pretty clear we need an AI to manage the AI kill switch, and then another AI to manage their kill switch.
Yeah, but who makes that AI and who trains that AI, and like what are the principles of that AI? And like what happens when it's like becomes more like a neural net where you're like, the further removed you are, an AI creating an AI creating an AI, the less, you have insight into like what's actually happening. So what happens if it reaches that level? And the decision it comes to is that in order for us to solve climate change, all humans must die. That's like a theory that people talk about a lot, right?
Right.
Right.
So I think that you need the human dimension, but I still say like even relational things are knowledge graphs. Things are all things you can boil almost everything down to math. Even the way you think, essentially, right? It's like synapses firing.
I guess I want most of this conversation to be about the story of Tuba, because
No,
I
I
think
like
you have an
this. I like
amazing
this
story.
this is Tooba. It's like
Well,
talking
this is
about
your comfort place, talking about big ideas, not talking about yourself.
yeah.
But I guess I do want to have a few more, sort of technical things before we dive into you, which is, I guess, do you think LLMs are the way that we're going to get to the most broadly useful
Time
AI?
out for a second. Time out for a
Yes.
second.
Okay.
I'm sorry. My dad listens to this podcast and he doesn't know what an LLM is. So could you define what an LLM is for me?
Absolutely. So, do you think that large language models,
Yeah.
the current systems that are used by the most famous AI companies like OpenAI, Anthropic,
Yeah.
even XAI, are just ingesting massive amounts of text, although they are now expanding, and in some ways mimicking human language.
Yeah.
Is that the path to the most broadly useful AI, or do we need some new approaches? And how much does this mimic the way the human brain and consciousness works versus being something completely separate?
I think, yeah, I mean, LLMs are a derivative of how humans operate anyways, because it's in the name. It's a language, right? Essentially.
Right.
I think that it will take us very far because whether it's like audio, video, or like whether it's like multimodal or like kind of actual language, like humans need like a communication mechanism in that way. So they gravitate towards solutions that are like anchored on that. Right. So if you
Yeah.
think about the foundation that exists right now in these models, and these models are going to continue to become better, I have theories on whether AGI stems out of LLMs versus like more traditional ML techniques. I feel like there's like something there, some mix of like quantum mixed with, because I feel like LLMs from a computation perspective are very limited in that way. So I don't know if AGI stems out of this, but in my head, it's a good foundation to start, essentially. There's a ton of misinformation that will lead to disillusionment. As an example, the part that people are treating LLMs like they're interns, right? So you're giving them like a ton of instructions, you're giving them like a ton of guardrails to say like operate in this way. But imagine like, like baby versions of yourselves as interns in companies. Like if nobody gave you instructions, the kind of things that you would do could have by far like surpassed like what the remit that you were given was. Like we are limiting even LLMs by prompting them in the way we prompt them. I think there was a company, their prompt was like 800 pages long. So
Oof, wow.
folks are like applying like how they would instruct a thing to LLMs
Right.
right now and already kind of restricting the power of LLMs. I don't think LLMs like get us there all the way. I think it's always going to be a combination of things. But to your question of like, is it emulating human thinking? Is it emulating, is it actually reasoning versus if it's just pretending to be reasoning? That's actually debated quite heavily in the AI community. There's a paper out almost every other day at this point. There was a paper out 2 days ago that talked about how large language models like don't reason. But like then people on the other side can say if it's emulating reasoning, isn't that reasoning as well?
I mean, do we reason, right?
Right.
Or are we just engaging in probabilistic neural networks in our, wet matter between our temples? We don't have a good model of that.
Until we take like, hallucinogens and like different pathways connect. Like essentially like this neural nets are based off of like humans, right? In that way. Matter of fact, there are companies where there are companies where neural nets are trained on, synthetic tissue grown in labs. And it's because like it's like a computation machine. So it's easier to look at like how the complexity we can handle and kind of build that into machines. So I think that from a machine perspective, it emulates humans, I think, and it will continue to emulate humans. But like outside of that, it's still like limited.
So it's what you just said is really interesting to me, right? Is that, from the meat computer side of things, right? You have hallucinogens,
Yeah.
which can make you think a different way, open up different pathways and
Yeah.
connect different sort of neurons, which are very much at the core of our wiring. Are there digital hallucinogens? Are there things that you can inject into computer reasoning? Are people developing these types of things to expand the reach of these highly prompted spaces? Is that something that you're thinking about?
I think that a version of that is information that is created by LLMs being used to retrain LLMs. I think is like a version of
Okay.
that where it's like layers of like synthetic then data at that point. And if you think of hallucination as like a feature, not a bug in that way, yeah, like there are new like things being created or new versions of things being created, and then LLMs being trained on that, like opens up the dimension. Now, on the other side of it, like how useful is that when we're applying them to very like deterministic use cases right now? Not super
Yeah.
useful, right? We want things to like be reliable in terms of output. The amount of people that for LLMs will, and even when I use it, I turn the temperature down to 0 because I want there to be reliability in answers in a certain way. I don't want there to be.
What's the temperature?
It's like
Sorry.
for variance, right? So the smaller than that number is, the less variance in output. Otherwise, if you ask a large language model a question, the same question every time will get you a very different answer,
Got it.
essentially.
Okay. That
Which
makes sense.
also is why there's a lot of hype around like what people use this for. I always tell people for businesses and for like business style use cases, like finance use cases, like even law use cases and stuff, like you need a lot of guardrails because like in terms of outputs of like math and numbers, etc., that's where LLMs, I would say, would probably hallucinate the most, essentially. So all these people who are like, I'm just going to throw my personal finances at ChatGPT and ask it, like, hey, tell me, like, like quick maths, or like tell me, like people are using it like a calculator, which is like the weirdest thing to me. Don't use it as a calculator because the 5 times it'll give you the right answer and you'll start trusting it. Next 3 times it might give you the wrong answer. We had an incident where someone, very high up in a company walked into a boardroom meeting from having asked an LLM to kind of distill his like business plan, walked into the boardroom meeting with numbers that directionally look correct, but were like not correct at all, and got called out on it. So word of caution, people, don't use LLMs directly for math.
Love it.
So I do want to go back a bit to you personally.
Yeah.
And your story. So you sort of talked at a high level about what got you interested in data science and AI, but can you tell us any stories? Did your mother tell you at 5, let the numbers always be your guide? Or what are some stories about how you felt connected to this?
I think, well, one, I'm brown, so that's to all brown parents. It's like their pathways are like engineer, doctor. I'm still like generationally, my parents were in that generation where it's like hard careers in that direction. And it is quite interesting because my early day interests were always creative. Like I liked painting and I like building things. My dad's an aeronautical engineer. I think that had a lot to do with my interest in hardware from the beginning. My early days, I was like, I wanted to be a mechanical engineer. So when I was like 8 or 9, this sounds so dorky. At 8 or 9, I was like, oh, I'm going to design like a hoverboard. And the mechanism I wanted to use to design a hoverboard was like, well, if you take like a vacuum and if you like reverse the airflow of a vacuum, could that like cause something to like levitate? Learned really fast, like physics and like mass quantities and all that. I could barely hold up a Barbie, essentially at that point. So I had interest in like tinkering and kind of building things. I early on ruled out wanting to be an astronaut because like I was like, it just, it feels isolating to me to be in space in that way. Then, my mother started pushing me more towards math when I told her I wanted to be a WWE wrestler. As like I was like, that is going to be my career choice because
She's like, it is time to get serious, Tooba.
yeah. And I was like, if my mom was like, let's get your grades to be good. And by the way, like, it's not like my grades were ever bad. It was like A wasn't good enough. Like A plus is like the thing. Let's get your grades to be good and then we'll figure out like what the career choice would be. So I think I always like had it in me. I think I read a lot, so I like always wanted to mix something creative with something like math or science related. Like I felt like physics and space and quantum was like the right kind of direction for me because there was so much wanderlust in like space to me.
Yeah.
And then that mixed with, okay, there's like science behind it, essentially. I think if I was like younger now, I probably would end up in something related to space, honestly. And not something, well, not that AI is not related to space, but something more in that direction, probably. But yeah, so I feel like I got incepted into that. And then I would say was finishing up my O levels and like in my head I had this idea of like I'm either going, this is in the UK, so I'm either going to go to MIT or Caltech. I was like, those are my two options. And at that age to be like that definitive about like a path mostly has to do with I want to please my parents, or like I found that this path has like can afford me a lifestyle, right? Essentially is like what you're looking at, or like a pedigree, essentially. And then, I finished high school in the US, went to MIT, had a miserable time. I had the most miserable time ever because it turns out that even dorky people need like non-dorky people essentially around them. Thankfully, I was like, honestly, my attendance
I believe you. Yeah.
was like under 5%. I would go to my professors and be like, I need to work and like I can't really study in this atmosphere. And like at that point, like lecture halls were like huge and everything. I just like realized like it was not the right way for me to kind of get information. I do better in like smaller settings. But at that point, I was getting bored of math. Right. My first job was at IBM right out of uni. And I was an engineer for 8 months there. And I was like, I'm done. I don't want to be in tech at all, like whatsoever. Math can feel very limiting if you're not doing the right thing. So like doing database warehousing for like 18 hours a day, where you're writing like tiny little queries and someone's just approving your queries. That's the coding you're doing at those early stages. It's not like, what Silicon Valley makes it out to be. For me, it was like, I'm like a tiny little cog in like this like giant machine. I never get to see impact of what I'm doing. So I felt like I got a little disillusioned from it. And then I like, kind of was like, let me try a bunch of things. That's where my interest in business came in. I was like, I'm going to try on the business side, whether it's like B2C, like e-com, B2C2B, like all these different styles of avenues. And then I got tired of humans. There's a lot of human interaction. So then I came back to the machine. So I came full circle, essentially. But I'm never going to be like all machine or all human. I feel like I like having a mix of both. And I feel like that's kind of where the future is at. But to answer your question, I got incepted, I would say, by my parents to be in this field. But I'd like to say I enjoy it now at this age more than I enjoyed it when I was younger. I was good at it, but I didn't enjoy it to that degree, I would say. Wow, this is therapy too. Thank you for that. At like 8:30 in the morning.
Actually, podcasting is part of what made me decide to become a therapist. I was like, I love asking people like way deeper questions than you're permitted to in normal context. So, therapy was
although to be honest, Timothy always asked very intrusive comments, even in the work.
Yeah, true.
That is true.
That's true. So it was always your path. There you go.
It was always your path, man.
Yeah.
I think we all knew it. In between, doing karaoke and musical theater at work, it was definitely
because I think now you have like a formal remit to do it, right? Versus just like being like an intrusive coworker asking questions.
That's exactly right. I couldn't get any other job where my behavior would be acceptable. Therapist it was. But I was just to say, Tooba, I love your story and how you've brought together all those elements of your history, sort of, being fascinated by math and what it was possible to create, but also wanting more human connection and exploring that through business. And now as a CEO of a technically oriented company, that's a beautiful outcome. There's something that I've been thinking about, especially as a parent, is what kind of advice to give my children. And there's a few layers of this. One is I'm just curious whether you think, was getting a PhD the right path for you? Because there's a lot of discussion now about, is college worth it? is formal education the right pathway to achieve your goals in life? And I'd love to hear whether you felt for you it got you what you wanted.
I think my career was like I got my bachelor's, and generally MIT, if you do course 6, you do your bachelor's and master's kind of together, and I did not. I got my bachelor's and I took a break. And then the reason I got back into studies is I missed research. I missed studying. So I was missing that part like in my life. And I think that is only apropos to certain people. I think it's like
Yeah.
certain people are like really into research. You know, I just feel like the day-to-day feels too limiting to certain people. So I'm like, I want to kind of be like, what is the next frontier, essentially? So my master's and my PhD stemmed out of that. It stemmed out of like me wanting to study something and then me finding a thread and pulling it and being like, okay, under this, I can expand this further or study this further, etc. I don't know if traditional education is the right pathway for everyone, but I do know that you can't go wrong if you study fundamentals because they apply to everything. So I would say, like, I don't know if like Ivy League schools and all of that like will be a thing in the future. Although for as much crap as people talk about Ivy Leagues, in the real world, it holds certain clout. It still does, right? So I think that aside, I don't know if like that's going to be the traditional path, but I do think that people should find the things that appeal to them, and then people should have a good understanding of fundamentals outside of that as well. Know the basics of math, physics, chemistry, biology. Know those basics because they apply to other parts of your life, and then apply your own, whether it's vocational training or something else like on top of that. Like no one's going, if you are skilled at something, if you are great at something, because you've studied it or you've practiced it, like that is your thing. No one can ever kind of take that away from you.
I mean, will that continue to be true? I mean, I think this is the moment we're in, especially if 5 years from now we believe, as in cognitive areas, AI will likely be better than, if not the best, very smart humans. What does that mean for that model that you've just presented of, be really strong in some fundamental area?
I would say, like, if you're in a class, right, and you are like an A grade student and there's a C grade student, that doesn't mean the C grade student isn't getting any benefit out of the class, right? Essentially, they're still learning something. So I think from a perspective of like and it entirely to me stems out of like human beings wanting to, like, the curiosity to play. If you have curiosity to play or tinker, you want to understand things. If you want to understand things, you will study things. So whether you like need formal education to apply it in a job or apply it to certain things, some of that education is just applicable in keeping your brain like running.
Interesting.
Right? Because there's a concept now that we talk about with LLMs causing browning out, which is like you turn your brain off. It's like when all spell checks came out, we stopped like learning how to spell, essentially, because like everything gets spell checked. So you're just like, okay, I'm gonna just make the red line go away somehow, some way. Like I'm not really right.
I'm going to right click on the red line.
Yeah,
that is how
exactly.
I make the red.
And the same thing is happening with LLMs. It's like we're so used to being able to be like, let me just ask right now, that it's for as much as it's created convenience in how much information we can access, it's also created laziness in people to be like, I could just ask. And like we know that because one, people panic the minute one of these systems goes down. And especially like younger software engineers will like heavily panic when things go down, like in terms of like what they're using to code, etc. And then number two, there's a graph. And then I guess I should share if we could be like the all-in podcast and toss up like visuals in the middle of it, right?
I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I'll share the graph with you of like how, like if you look at ChatGPT usage, like how it climbs and declines based on like school cycles, essentially. So I think that like certain things you only learn, like you don't learn coding because like I want to learn how to write in SQL or like Python. You learn coding because you want to be a better critical thinker, essentially, and how to solve problems in a specific way. So the people who are the best coders are really good problem solvers. And that's why their like skill applies to like multiple languages really easily. It's very easy for them to pick up like multiple coding languages. And the people who are like memorizing code or memorizing like certain pathways in code just because like I'm going to apply it, move away from it. Those
Yeah.
are the people that, can't really solve like things like lead code problems, etc., like all of that. So I think that there will always be a need to teach people how to think and to think. And that education has a big part in that. I mean, it's also like your environment has a big part in it, I would say. Like think of school as like I have this amount of time set aside for only thinking related activities, right? Interaction related activities. So I think you'll need that, but I don't know if education looks the same in the future, I would say.
I guess so. If somebody is, say, a college junior right now,
Yeah.
and they are thinking to themselves, I want to join the AI revolution. I want to work in AI in some capacity.
Yeah.
Do you have what would be your advice to them?
Well, I would ask them why. Why do you want to join it? If you want to join it because you want to become rich or you want to be like a part of this revolution, do something like the Cluely kids did, right? Essentially, which is like they're young 20-year-olds. They created this company. It stemmed out of them, they got kicked out of school. I think they were dropouts from like building software that they would use to cheat on exams. So if you want to get in it for monies, if you want to get in it for fame, then I think that, you don't need even like a formal bachelor. It's just like upskill yourself on the thing itself, right? And then most startups, most institutions now will bring you in based on like how many projects you've done or like how well you can do certain things. So that's one way to break into it. The other way to break into it is like if you want to be the new OpenAIs of the world or the new Anthropics of the world. I feel like that requires expertise, that requires studying, and that could look different in different places. Doesn't mean you have to get a PhD. It could mean that you are like taking, like, what does a PhD teach you? PhD teaches you like there's an unsolved problem, and I'm going to spend X amount of years trying to figure out like what could be the potential solutions, and then I'm going to get that peer reviewed, right? That's essentially what a PhD is. So like if you go through that process, you learn if I come across something that is completely unsolved and I want to solve it, what are the steps that I need to take? How do I need to structure my thinking in a way that I get to the end result? So I would say there are always going to be people who do PhD-esque things, like whether it's research projects or publishing papers, blah, 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 all of that. But I think that for kids breaking in, it depends on what you want to do. I would say a good majority of people are on the side of this is like a good, like it's a bubble and I want to be in the bubble until the bubble bursts. So I think for them, leveling up and leveling up by doing it on your projects and like on your skills, I think could be more than enough, essentially. It's the perfect time in the world to take a gap year. Take a gap year, work on projects, right? Like there are like a ton of like open source things like repos and stuff that you can play around with it until you become somewhat proficient in it and then become better than some of the people and then go apply to these startups and they will hire you.
I'd really just love to get a sense from you, Tuba, is, as you have gone through different stages in your career, I think you've taken risks in different places, left companies, left places to go and really invest in yourself. Was there a moment in time or a moment in your life that taught you how to do that? Because I think some people don't really feel comfortable betting on themselves or feeling comfortable in their own knowledge and expertise to say, I can do this, or I can create a company, or I can take that step. I'm just wondering for you, was there a moment that you can point back to that, you know,
That's a good
was
question.
transformative?
I don't think there's a single moment that's transformative. I am like, not to bring zodiac into this, I am a Sag. So I am inherently a risk taker. And to me, I have never wanted to be defined by like a thing, essentially. And like when we work together, it's like, yeah, like I am in a role, but that's like a role is just like a role. Like I don't really care what the role is.
You definitely took what you were given and brought it in a whole new direction
100%.
that
Yeah, because I was like,
highlighted
it's like,
your skills.
it's, you know yourself best. And like,
Because your role was very limited and you
yeah,
made something great out of it, which is not what it initially was.
no, it wasn't. And I could have said, I'm just going to do really, really, I could be type A and I'm going to do really, really well in this role. But I think people who are like naturally like just like anxious about like, this is not enough, like end up being in a kind of atmosphere where it's like, I'm going to create opportunity for myself. No one else is going to create it for you. You have to create it for yourself. But then that requires you like wanting more or wanting more opportunity. And for me, like, wanting more didn't necessarily mean taking, like I could have taken a very traditional path from the beginning and then probably ended up making a lot more than I do now, especially as a founder. I don't make a lot. So I could have done that. But for me, I was like, I just want to keep building like chapters in my book, essentially, is the way
Love
to
that.
put it. And I was like, I never want my, like, sometimes you read like the front cover of a book and you're like, I kind of know what the book is going to be about. And I don't want my book to be something that people can understand or anticipate by reading just like the front cover or even a chapter, essentially. So to me, like, it's like collecting experiences, and that will never go away for me. And I think like for whatever reason, I was just built that way. But I think that the one thing I'll say this, and I'll say this especially to, I would say, like women specifically, very hard time investing in ourselves and very much give a lot to other people. And I know that's changing somewhat, but it like almost makes us like anxious or nervous to advocate for ourselves. It makes me nervous to advocate for myself as well. When I went through my fundraising cycle, like one of the biggest kind of pieces of feedback I got from my board member was that you have a hard time even speaking about your background or yourself. Like I would put my background slide like all the way at the end. And we're like, no, you should lead with why do you have authority to be in a room? Like what gives you authority to be in a room and to solve this problem? So I think that women especially, and whether you have mentors who teach you that, whether you like have other like women around you teach you that, need to advocate for yourselves, because we're already starting from like a lower spot on the totem pole. And then I think that there's a unique advantage, especially when you are on the younger side, is you can be a little brash within reason, within respect. You can be a little brash, and like sometimes they'll like open up doors for you. I see a lot of examples now of like folks just like, I'm just going to email Sam Altman, or I'm just going to email like this CEO and just like ask this question. And I feel like people should have, if you're curious about something, people who are up here are still people, essentially.
Yeah.
I think we learned that at the forum, and we were like, no titles. Like it really applies. Like if you don't put yourself in a box, and a title will put you in a box. If you don't put yourself in a box, then you don't look at the world in the same way. And within reason, right? I'm not saying like go knock like at a president's door and be like, hey, like you owe me an answer. Although I have done silly things like that, not with public figures.
And did it work? Did it work out for you?
It worked for me because, again, I wasn't doing it from a place of affiliation. I was doing it very authentically from a place of like, well, I need answers to this. And if people under you aren't able to answer to it, why shouldn't you have to answer to it? Like I'm not one to like just accept a rule, right? I want to understand like why is this the way it is. So I think if you're coming from that kind of place, it can work for you. It also burnt me in a lot of ways because I was very open and almost to the point of like sitting people down and like giving them a bit of like a lashing, like to that degree of like, why would you do it this way? So there was some.
I remember getting a few Tooba lashings in my day.
I was about to say,
yeah.
Confirm this is a thing.
It came.
But we're
It always
better
comes from
people
a
for
good
it.
place, because I think the people
Yes.
around me, I want everyone around me to do well. I've always had that in me, where it's like I'm invested in everyone's success, and I get irritated when people do silly things sometimes. Where I'm like, this is so stupid. Like, why would you do that or do it this way? So I don't know maybe the best way to articulate it, but it comes from a good place. So I think as long as there's some genuine intention behind it, and you're not afraid of the consequences, because they could be bad consequences, I think when you're especially younger, you should practice that. And I think in your 30s, I got this advice from someone, and like I can't thank them enough. Practice rejection therapy a lot, essentially. A lot. And especially after COVID days, practice it a lot, because then when rejection happens to you in certain like pivotal moments of your life, you're really able to kind of like surf that a lot better than you would if you didn't. And it's a muscle. You have to do it consistently. So even like in public, like going up to people and saying certain things to just get yourself out of that comfort zone. So I would say, and those are examples of investing in yourself to me as well. Like investment doesn't just look like I'm studying. Investment could look like, I'm like walking up to a random person and being like, what are you going to make with this? Because I'm nervous to talk to random people, as an example.
Oh, that's fair.
What's the hardest part about being a founder that people don't see?
I think it's the amount of brain splitting you have to do, like every day. Because the pressure, I think everyone sees. Like I feel an immense amount of pressure not to make the company successful because my team, right? I feel an immense amount of pressure that I'm responsible to them, right? Which is also why sometimes it blows my mind that people are bad leaders, because I'm like, how could you feel the pressure, but like, not want to like kind of protect that team? So it's like neither here nor there. But I think that people are like, okay, there's a lot of pressure because you're doing a ton of things. But I think the brain splitting between not just like work, home, friends, like all of that, your personal like well-being, that is hard because at any given time, like 2 or 3 of those things are not going to happen. So you're either like, not a great like partner, you're either like not a great friend because like you have to do all these things and you cannot foster your friendships, or like, like you're not like running or you're not exercising for your own well-being. I think that part of it is very difficult. It's very difficult to keep all the balls in the air, essentially, in life, essentially.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really, really great conversation. It went in different directions than I expected.
It's more philosophy, I would say.
Yeah, it was a little bit more philosophical, the transformative effects of AI, and I think really hearing from you sort of this journey that you've been on of investing in yourself and finding your path. And I just want to say thank you so much, Tooba, for being open with us and like having this great conversation. One thing we always ask people at the end of this is how you see us. Would you say we're technically colleagues, or would you say we're technically friends?
I would say we're friends. If we were colleagues, then we wouldn't be talking right now in that
Fair.
way, right? Like to
I think
me,
so.
at least from my perspective, like I have a ton of colleagues. I don't really even talk to them openly in this way. So I would think we're friends, and I would say it's very refreshing to have friends who are like, there's not that pressure of like we always have to be talking or we always have to keep like, but I think like as a community we do come together enough to know pivotal things are happening in each other's lives, right? So I think it's a new age of like more relaxed friendship, but I definitely feel like we're like on the friends dimension versus colleagues dimension.
Well, fantastic. I was hoping you'd say that. I feel better already.
Imagine I said no. You are colleagues, and this.
That
It
would have been
hasn't happened yet.
hilarious.
It hasn't happened yet, but I hope it does. I hope it does someday.
So, Tooba, one very important question. Had you come up with a wrestler name when you thought you were going to be a WWE superstar?
I think I didn't come up with a name, but I wanted to closely emulate Triple H, I think was my vibe.
Hunter Hurst Helmsley, is that his name?
Yeah, it needs to. Well,
Okay.
initially it was Stone Cold Steve Austin, and then I was like, okay, well, and then I was like Triple H. So I think I would have, like how they're like some of the female wrestlers are like a little prissy. I would say
Yeah.
I was not. I was always
Okay.
like, yeah, like my legacy needs to be like the Undertaker or something. Like everyone is
Yeah.
like
Love it.
scared when I like walk out.
I mean, unfortunately, for that era of WWF, I'm sure your name would have been something like vaguely racially inappropriate
Yeah.
and insulting, like the Brown Beauty or some shit
Yeah,
like
some
that.
like
But
fucking Aladdin reference or something. Yes.
yes,
Yeah, 100%. It would have been something
Aladdin's
like that.
princess.
Yeah, and like that would
But
have
what?
irritated me probably. Yeah.
But I wonder what would have a great name for you. Anyway, we can think
We'll think
about this
offline and
offline.
get back
My
to
name
it.
is
Yeah.
odd enough already. It's like,
The terrible Tuba.
yeah.
Tooba the Terrifier.
There you go.
Yeah. But that could be like a war name too. No?
Well, I mean,
Like
wrestling
Vlad
and
the
war.
Impaler, like Tuba the Terrifier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
it.
In the dystopian AI universe, when the AI takes over and you're leading the rebellion, the Terrifier, Tuba the Terrifier.
I have been known as Hurricane Tuba or Tornado Tuba because I used to come into places and be like, all of this is a mess, and like rip apart all of this and like recreate all these processes and stuff.
I love that you're a CEO now and you have to be a semi-responsible individual rather than
Yeah,
a
haven't I
force of
grown,
destruction.
guys? Yeah, that's true. I'm a much more evolved version of myself. But I would not be this person had I not done all those stupid, silly little things back then, honestly. I have a lot more empathy for leaders now. I will say that. A lot more. Like constantly I'm like,
Yeah.
like I imagine if someone did that to me, like what I did to some people, Like I would have such a hard time with that. I could never manage myself at all. And I bring that up in my interviews, actually. I always like tell people I'm a very particular type of personality. So more than your hard skill set, like you need to be able to like operate at this level with
I
me.
mean, some people can only be CEO, right? Like there's people I'd give $1 million to for their startup,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't hire them for any role in my company.
Yeah.
And you might be one of those people.
All I know is like if there is a going back, as in like if like things are successful or like whatever, and like I have to ever work under someone, I would have a hard time with that again. So I wonder if I just end up becoming a serial entrepreneur. Who knows? But
Well, thank you so much, Tooba, for spending time with us. It's been great. And I look forward to getting this out there and highlighting you and your company. And we'll talk soon.
yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much,
Bye.
Tooba.
Cheers.
Great seeing you.
Thank you again for joining us on the Technically Friends podcast. Thank you to Tooba, my co-host Timothy, for joining us today in this conversation. Please do like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you view it, whether that's YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any others. We really appreciate any feedback you have or reviews. So please do provide that, and we read every one. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.